Johnson Anene is to my immediate right. He was the former Vice President, Abuja Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm still the Vice President.
You're still the Vice President?
Yes.
Why do I have former here? My team? I don't know. Do you want to... anyway, let me not talk. I apologize for that.
It's okay. Thank you.
Vice President, Abuja Chamber of Commerce. Stephen Ajiya is a policy analyst. Welcome, Mr. Ajiya.
Thank you.
Let's get started. 2019 budget. In fact, just as both of you were sitting, and you know what came to my mind when I was just thinking about this topic. Nigeria's economy emerged from a recession in 2017, a second quarter of 2017, and I do think that for a country that is so serious, and an economy that also wants to get out of that fragility, because the economy is still suffering that fragility, that I should think that we'll take the issues of governance seriously, bearing in mind the budget. Because the budget is the working document of any government, isn't it, so to speak. But we are not seeing that speed. We are not seeing, we are just going about things. Do both of you understand what I mean? In the sense that this is an economy that is trying to find its feet after a recession. The budget matter should be on the table of this government. What do you think, Mr. Anene?
Yes, thank you very much. I quite agree with you. We should be seen to be more serious, especially with issues relating to investment and the private sector. Because we know that it's the private sector that drives every economy. You cannot rely on government to do things. Government has nothing to do with business apart from providing enabling environment, apart from regulations. So it is to provide a good platform for private business concerns to thrive. So I think that the government needs to do more in the area of provision of infrastructure, in the area of provision of general enabling business climate for businesses to thrive. So the issue of budget, like you've said, is a critical thing. And I expect that by now, activities, although when you consider the fact that this is an election year, so there are certain things you don't expect to have started happening because of the election. From towards the end of last year up until now, it's been campaigns and the election, which is also very critical to the development of any economy. So the election year has played, the process of election has played a very, very important role. So, but now that the elections are over, we expect that the government will now begin to, do a lot to catch up, because we have lost quite some time. I can tell you that the government needs to do a lot to win back that confidence from the private investors, people that will be able to generate that economic activities that we need. It's not only the government. The government can do much, but we also need to get the private sector actively involved.
Okay, let me bring in Mr. Ajiya here. What's your own view? Because, like Mr. Anene said, this year is an election year. Yeah. But I also do think that even though it's an election year, for any serious country, there are some things you can actually also do. Or, there's a system you can put in place so that even as you're going for elections, governance and the rest of the country doesn't suffer, as it were. Even before elections, as it were. 2018 budget was signed in June, I think precisely 20th of June, 2018. And that was not an election year now, So what's your own assessment of it?
If I'm to understand what you are trying to say about debt profile.
That's about 22 trillion. In Naira terms, about 22.3 trillion Naira. That's our debt profile.
Just as debt profile.
We'll come to that.
It is killing. And you think we can just go on like this? We have enough money in this country. We are talking about election year. There's a period, there's a report that a certain person was seen with bullions van in his house with money. I'm not saying that money is not legal. But if that person, if the tax people can go there, they will get enough money for the government. But behold, they are not doing that. This is.
Are you saying that FIRS is not doing it?
No,
because, for example, in the last few months, FIRS placed even a lien, asked banks to freeze account of some people that had billions of naira in their accounts that they were not paying taxes and all of that. FIRS has, you know.
They tried. What happened? I think there was a court order that stopped them from doing that. They can't do that.
How about the amnesty thing that was done last year?
It's still not working because of political patronage.
Are you saying it's not working at all, or is not not enough?
No, the government itself is not willing to use the sledgehammer.
Because FIRS generated over 5 trillion naira last year,
yes,
the whole of 2018.
And what I'm saying that they can do better. If we are not, supposing we are not getting money from the oil sector, what do you think? Are we going to just die like that? There are countries that don't have money.
That don't have oil.
Oh yeah, they don't have oil, but they still get money from the taxes. What happened to this country? The private sector cannot, if you want to drive the economy to the private sector, the government itself needs to do enough. We are just seeing the beginning of budget crisis, because when the recurrent expenditure expand by increment in salaries, there's going to be a problem.
Now,
if we look at it, where we are going to get this money for
now
to finance that deficit.
Ms. Anene, you want to comment before I start?
Yes,
asking.
please let me come in. You see, if we are talking about FIRS, whether they are doing well or not, before we pass a judgment on them, we have to look at where we are coming from. The tax profile, what was this country generating through tax before the current regime? You can see that it's a very, very good progress and improvement. But aside that, FIRS is tax programs or procedures or whatever should not be such that it will discourage investment. It should not be such that it will discourage business activities. What I would be thinking that the government will do is to, like I've said earlier, try to create more investment-friendly climate that will make people to invest that money that they are holding.
Now, the question is not even just about investment that we're talking about. We are talking about the monies that government needs right now to do quite a lot, isn't it? Is that not also what is in the budget in terms of recurrent, in terms of capital? The capital end is what private investors may even take a look at. Ordinary Nigerians like me and you to see, okay, there could be an opening. Government wants to do this. I could position myself in all of that. Now, let's come down to the nitty-gritty. The recurrent, he said something which is quite germane, which is not yet reflected. The 30,000 naira minimum wage that has just even been recommended by the National Assembly. The question is, where would the money come from? But don't also forget that President Buhari set up a committee.
I was coming to that. You know, the heading of this budget is Budget of Economic Diversification, Inclusive Growth and Sustainable Development. So the government, I will say, is thinking in the right direction. And also, because they are thinking about diversification, moving away completely from dependence on oil to some other areas. And like you rightly observed, the government has set up a committee that will be able to come up with how they can fund this budget. And we know that why this budget is lower than that of last year is because the government wants to play down on borrowing. They don't want to borrow. They want to kind of look more inwards on how to generate the revenue to fund the budget. That's why you can see that the the provision for this budget is lower than that of last year, because last year more money was borrowed to fund capital projects. And this time the government is not so keen in borrowing. They have reduced the borrowing, the money that they want to borrow this year. But the issue again is that government, I would say, is thinking in the right direction, because well, for you to really improve on economic activities, I've said it and I will continue to say it, we need to give more attention to the private sector. And I know that from the budget of this year, a provision of about 45 billion was made and set aside for the funding of SMEs, so that these SMEs and the agri sector can access loan at single-digit interest rate. And if that is done, that will help the economy to really pick up. Another area is in fact, I think the major problem we are having in this country is the issue of lending rates. That is the problem. Because whether budget or no budget, the major problem is with the banks. If private investors can access funds at good interest rates, you find out that a lot of business people would depend less on government. Because if you have a good business, idea or proposal, and you can walk into a bank, a commercial bank, and you are able to access funds, loan, and the interest is not killing. I know that interest rates, lending rate is between 25 and 30%. It's not done anywhere, and they cannot grow any economy. I wonder what business somebody can do, legitimate business, then after paying your overheads, you pay interest, cost of funds, at 30%, and you still have enough margin for you to grow that business. It's very difficult. It's almost impossible. Yeah. So I think what we should really be working towards is how to reduce the lending rates. Because if the banks are well-funded, they are stable enough, and they are liquid enough as to give out loans to business people such that they can access these loans at single-digit interest rates and be able to do business, you see, it will have a multiplier effect. Mm. It will create more jobs. Even this thing we are talking about, tax, they will make tax should be on profit. Tax really should be on
the
profit.
Profit that the businesses make.
Yes, profit. But if you are not making profit, 30% of your profit is going to
power.
The banks. We are not talking about power yet.
Yeah.
You are taking away 30% upfront to pay interest on the loan you collected to do the business. Before you talk about power, before you talk about salaries, before you talk about rent and all other overheads, you find out that it's very difficult for that person or that business interest to be sustained.
Okay, no, let's bring in Mr. Ajiya.
Let's go back to the budget. I think our emphasis is still on the budget.
Yes, but he's also saying that...
let's go to where we are going. We are talking about a situation where the current budget is about 4.04 trillion. Mm-hmm. And debt service is about 2.14 trillion naira. And the capital expenditure is about 2.031 trillion naira. Now, where do you get this money to finance the issue of 30,000 increment in salary? My concern is that we are going to still enter a big problem. If government do not diversify the economy, they have been saying this for the past 4 years.
Is it diversify the economy or diversify revenue?
No, when you divide the economy, eventually the income will come from all these sectors. You understand? If you put emphasis on generating, let's say, power and you are able to sell it very well, maybe outside the country, you put more money there, you are going to generate revenue. So it comes from your investment or the policy that the government has adopted. We are going to have a problem because government needs to find a way where revenue will have to come in. The states are taking a lot of it from them. Other criminal activities are taking a lot from them. And even the budget implementation is a problem.
How the state's taking a lot from the budget?
Let me tell you what happened recently.
When if you look at the federal government has 52% of what they come to Abuja to share.
They have 50.
The federal government takes 52, yes. States and local government share the rest.
Mm-hmm. The emphasis there now is that if the federal government is taking 52%
yes.
out of the money, what is actually implemented? If you see the capital expenditure, 2.1 trillion is not enough to generate a lot of activities in the economy. That's what we are saying. And if you put the 4.4 trillion into the economy, where it's just recurrent expenditure, and I'm saying that in the next 3 or 4 months or 5 months, this thing will balloon again. Now, you are giving a name to a budget. This name has been coming in for the past 4 years, that they are going to diversify, they are going to do this, they are going to do this. We don't need the president to tell us what we need to do. By now, there should have been a parastatus that handles our diversification by now. Now he wants to set up a committee. The committee.
Are you saying the government should create another bureaucracy?
Of course, it's possible.
Another commission, for example,
to look at where
ballooning the recurrent expenditure, which you are complaining about. Would they take salaries?
No, it's a commission. A commission might not take a lot from.
But this one that the president has put together, the committee by Sulaiman Barao, Bismarck Rewane, and co.
What have they been doing since all this?
I guess they are still working.
They are still working. That is the problem we are having. I'm coming. If not because the President Buhari has been re-elected by now, this government will have gone. The next government that will have come will have thrown away this, and another commission start. But if you have a commission that they have responsibility, either after this government or another government, if this government is not there, they take up this issue very well.
I would disagree with you in that sense, because, hold on, Mr. Anene, because if you're saying that another bureaucracy should be created, you already have agencies of government that should do that one way or the other. There's NIPC there, isn't it? There's NEPC headed by Shago Awolowo, NIPC by Yewande Sadiku and co. All the other parastatals, what are they doing?
By admission. They are not working properly. That is where the problem is coming from.
How then are we sure that this new commission will work better than the ones that
you match them. Instead of you have mentioned like 5. I'm coming. You have mentioned like 5 commissions now, doing almost the same.
You see, my brother.
What you needed to do, I'm coming. What you needed to do is to match them and give them a matching order. Where the problem is coming from is that once a commission is created, is given a responsibility. Once another government comes, they discard what they are doing.
So if I get what you're saying in essence, President Buhari should create another commission.
Backed by law.
Backed by law. That would take
the
diversification.
Yes. Either you match these commissions together where their profile will be to diversify the economy.
You see, let me come in.
Yes.
You see, let me come in.
It's a bit hard what you are postulating.
You see, let me come in.
Because,
we are complaining about how heavy the recurrent expenditure.
That's what you complain. Your
solution is
still
Let me tell you where the recurrent commission is coming from. I'm coming. Let me clear the issue.
Okay,
this recurrent expenditure. If you know where some of them are overhead costs. If you reduce the overhead cost of government, ESTA codes, most of this recurrent expenditure will go down.
But creation of a new
commission. If you have to look at, it's not just putting something in paper. You are just bringing people the current expenditure every year in 1 year in, year out. You bring the same postulation and say people should have ESTA code. They should have this. If you reduce it, government, if it is serious, can reduce this recurrent expenditure to just over 3 trillion or
You're
less.
saying that government should trim itself.
You should trim itself, but they're not trimming themselves. You have Esther code. You have where people are just taking money. They just sit down and say because they are traveling, they are going for training. They do some training. They don't even go.
No,
And
but,
if you look at
some of those trainings have been cancelled when Buhari came in.
Yes,
No. So he cancelled some of them at the beginning of the administration. No foreign training and all of that.
You see, let me come in.
I don't know if they've started again, but at that time
I know.
No, but he cancelled it.
Yeah, he cancelled
yes,
it.
it's
Now
one
you're
thing.
answering yourself.
But
you don't know
it's on paper that he's cancelled it. Yes.
You see, I do not support the creation of any new commission. What we need to do is to strengthen the ones that we already have. And there's no duplication of duties whatsoever. NIPC, Nigerian Investment Promotion Commission, their duty is to attract investments into this country. Their mandate is very clear, and they are doing it. You have NEPC, Nigerian Export Promotion Council. Their own is to encourage export of made in Nigerian products.
Which is also diversification.
Which is completely on its own, and they are pursuing that mandate. Then you have the Bank of Agriculture, which is to fund investments in the agri sector. You have Bank of Industry, which is to fund investment in industrial and manufacturing sector.
You have an EXIM.
You have the NEXIM. You even have the Federal Mortgage Bank.
Right.
So all these, they have their separate mandates. What we want to do is to strengthen them the more, to make sure that they deliver better on their mandates. Then, coming to the issue of diversification, we are in it. We are already doing that. And the fact that you are coming up with a budget and you are giving a title to that budget, that means that you are already thinking in that line. You are not ignorant of the needs that the country has. Now, that diversification is the key, and the economic growth. Now, if we are able to, like I have said, about the issue of getting these banks to be able to give out loan, because access to finance is the major problem. Any businessman or woman will have access to fund. So now, like from this budget, there's a provision to fund the SMEs better. There's also a provision to fund agriculture.
Hold on. All these things you are saying, we know, but the thing is that we are still in the same pothole. Do you understand? So
our problem should be on implementation.
But we've always had a problem with implementation.
Do
you understand what we're saying? If you're saying about 45 billion has been a mark for SMEs, fantastic. The issues are, how are you even going to de-risk that SMEs can have access to that finance? Central Bank, on one hand, has said there will be a creation of a nicer microfinance bank, Bankers Committee, NIPOST, and yes, about 3 of them, nicer, 5% interest rate. The issue is, if these monies are there, how do these small businesses get them?
That is the major problem. That is the major problem, because these monies are made available. You know, the CBN cannot advance these monies to the beneficiaries. They cannot.
They can't do that directly.
They cannot. Now is the banks, the commercial banks. That is where we have our problem.
But the issue of investment, hold on.
He is talking from a comfort zone, because if he wants to access these funds he's talking about, possibly because of his disposition, they'll give it to him.
No. I'm sitting here to represent the organized private sector, the SMEs. My problem is that these monies that are meant to fund SMEs, fund agriculture, don't get to the people
let's allow
the problem is from the banks.
No, you see, if you are talking from a privileged position, I repeat. I'm talking about someone who has tried these particular organizations, Bank of Industries. We just want a small loan where you can set up a farm. The type of hectares of land they say we should bring first before you can access that. As if this is what you are trying to do. But that is not what we are here for. We're here to talk about budget. How do
The
you
issue of
curb-
investment will come later.
No, but it's part of the budget.
Yes,
We are
yes.
also
No,
talking
if you-
about
if you know,
what the government
the
is doing
president
to
did not-
diversify and to grow the economy.
The president did not
These are
emphasize
part of-
on investment. What the budget we are talking about, how do you curb recurrent expenditure that has taken over the chunk of the budget? You are having civil servants duplicating the same job. The function of import bank, export promotion, bank of industry, technically they are doing the same job with a different name.
I
No,
disagree.
I'm coming.
It's not true.
I'm coming. Let me
It's
tell
not
you.
true.
Let me
It cannot be
let me
because
feed you.
NIPC.
We
Let me come in. Let me
have
feed
cannot
you.
be.
we have to go
It
in the
can't
next
be.
few minutes.
Yes,
So I'll need you to do your concluding remarks
Yes.
very quickly. Yes, go ahead, Mr. Ajiya.
Yes, we want to thank Mr. President that he has been elected as the next president. If you listen to what we are saying, let him look into the possibility of creating or merging these parastatals or whatever their names are, so that we can have a position where the economy can be diversified. And let me remind him that most of this bank of industry and most of these many people cannot get access to them except you are from a privileged society. Because if you are not privileged, this thing you are talking about, let him carry me to one of them. You see, nothing will come out. Nancy, come bring the name, the next program and tell me what was our experience. We have tried this thing. It is not coming. Ordinary farmer cannot get access to this money. I tried one. I went through a commercial bank to see if we can access this one. The language they are speaking, it was so long that even myself, I had to go and sit down. The money, the capital that is expected before you can access this loan is enough for you to be on your own, not to go to the bank. That is where the problem is coming from.
It's okay. You see,
Very quickly, Mr.
Yes,
Anene,
yes. The thing is that I have said it earlier, and I want to say it again. Our problem is not with policies, but with implementation. And the major problem, I will still continue to say it, this country is having, is about our lending rate, access to funds. That is the problem every private sector business person is facing. Now, the issue of that we are sitting on a comfort zone, it cannot be.